Alright children, welcome back to AP Macroeconomics with your favorite teacher, me, Mr. Fritz. Today we're going to talk about aggregate supply and aggregate demand. In the last two videos, I talked about aggregate demand and aggregate supply. The demand or supply of everything in the economy. So we're looking at the macroeconomy now. And this equilibrium here is going to be our equilibrium in the aggregate supply and aggregate demand model. Remember the two things that we're measuring here. On our x-axis, we're going to be looking at real GDP. Sometimes you're going to see that as real output, and sometimes you'll also see that described as real income or real national income. And then on our y-axis, we're going to have the price level. And remember that that's a measurement of inflation. So as the price level is increasing, inflation is increasing and prices are going up. If the price level is decreasing, then we're experiencing disinflation or maybe even deflation. Prices might even go down. Generally though, if we're experiencing disinflation, it's just going to be that prices are still going up, just more slowly than they used to be. The equilibrium point on this graph, where aggregate supply and aggregate demand meet each other and are equal to each other, we're going to label this as PL1, our price level 1, and Y1, our real output 1, like where we are currently operating at. A couple reasons that we call this Y1. First and foremost, Y actually stands for income. So we're talking about our real income. Why is income Y? Well, it's because I was already taken for interest rates. As the graph moves out to the right, as Y increases and moves out to the right, real GDP is increasing. Again, that means that real output is increasing and real income is increasing. Things to keep in mind. If real output is increasing or real GDP is increasing, the most important letter in this real GDP is the P, production. As production increases, your unemployment rate is going to go down. As more stuff is being made, that means more people are going to have to be working and our unemployment rate will go down. If Y is decreasing and moving to the left, then production is decreasing, we're making less stuff, and your unemployment rate will be going up. Businesses aren't going to pay people to come in and not make stuff, so they're going to start firing people. Now we're going to talk about shifts in the aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve that can cause changes to our output and price level. For our first example, we're going to look at what happens if many consumers are expecting a recession next year. The funny thing about economics is, if you expect something to happen and act accordingly, then you're going to cause that thing to happen. So if we look here, if consumers are expecting a recession to come, consumers are going to be part of aggregate demand. Remember, it's C, I, G, and X. So if consumers expect a recession and stop spending their money because they're afraid that they might lose their job soon, well then, consumer spending will decrease, which means that aggregate demand will decrease and shift to the left. And now, here's our new AD1 curve. We've got an arrow showing which way our curve is shifting. I'm going to label my new price level, which is going to be PL2. Show a downward arrow showing that we're experiencing some disinflation. Prices aren't rising as quickly as they had been. And then I'm also going to label the new output as Y2. This is our new real national income, or our new real GDP, or our new real output. Aggregate demand is decreased. That's made price levels fall, so inflation is slowing down. Our output has decreased, so our production is down. That means that our unemployment rate is actually going to be going up. People are going to be losing their jobs because no one's spending money. All right, children, for this next example, we're going to look at what happens if nominal wages decrease. So remember, nominal wages are what a business has to pay to people in order to get them to work. So nominal wages are going to be an input cost. Wages affect our aggregate supply. You need to keep in mind, wages are going to affect supply. Wages are what businesses have to pay people so that they will work, so that they will produce goods and services. Income is going to affect aggregate demand. Income is the money that people actually take home, and that will affect our C, consumer spending, and so that will affect aggregate demand. If wages are decreasing, businesses can hire more people with the same amount of money. And so that's going to cause them to be able to create and produce more goods and services. So if wages decrease, aggregate supply will increase and shift to the right, and now businesses can hire more people for the same amount of money. Aggregate supply shifts to the right. Remember that no matter which curve you're looking at, if it's increasing, it's shifting to the right. If it's decreasing, it's shifting to the left, no matter what. It doesn't matter which curve you're looking at. You should never be saying that aggregate supply is going up or down. Because remember, if you say aggregate supply goes up and you meant that it's increasing, you might actually draw your new aggregate supply curve up higher, which would be showing a decrease in aggregate supply. So you need to say that it either increases or decreases, not up or down. It doesn't go down in here, children. It's not the DMs. All right, so aggregate supply increases and shifts to the right. And now, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I don't know why I counted down for that. Now our price level is lower and we're experiencing disinflation. So prices aren't rising as quickly as they had been. So now that our aggregate supply has increased, our real GDP has increased. So this is going to be Y2 out farther to the right. That means our production is increasing. If our production is increasing, we need more people to work. Unemployment is going to be going down. So our unemployment rate is lower and our inflation is lower as well. Our price level is lower and the inflation is slowing down. For the last one, I want to talk about what would happen to the macroeconomy if there is a decrease in the real interest rate. So for this problem, the real interest rate is decreasing. Remember that the interest rate is going to be the price of borrowing money. So the people that are paying interest rates are people that borrow money. So if the real interest rate is lower, meaning that the interest rate adjusted for inflation over the next 5, 10 years, if that's lower, it's going to be cheaper to borrow money. Who's going to be affected by that? We're going to look at C, I, G, and X. The part of the aggregate demand that's going to be most affected by this is going to be your I, your investment spending. Remember, investment spending is done by businesses when they buy capital goods. So they're spending millions of dollars at once on giant machines. And even big companies are going to have to borrow money in order to do that. And so if the real interest rate decreases, it's going to be cheaper to borrow. So businesses will increase their investment spending and aggregate demand will shift to the right and increase. So we end up with a higher aggregate demand. Now our price level has increased. And our output has increased as well, and that means that our real GDP is increasing, and because our production is increasing, our unemployment rate is going to be going down. Hooray! Now, the real last one. Okay, now I want to look at what happens if the world price of oil increases. Oil becomes more expensive. We got to keep in mind that oil is something that's used in the production of literally everything. So oil is used to produce energy, it's used to produce plastic that we wrap goods and services in, it's used to turn into fuel, to drive the boats that ship items to and from other places in the world. Oil goes into the production of everything. Oil is an input in the production of everything, so if it gets more expensive, it's going to be harder to produce literally everything, and the aggregate supply curve will shift to the left. This is super bad. First, I labeled my new aggregate supply curve 1. I've got an arrow showing that I've shifted the curve to the left. Now the two bad things that happen. Our price level is now much higher. So inflation is occurring. And at the same time, we're also having a decrease in our real GDP. That means that our production is decreasing as well, and our unemployment rate is going up. So everything costs more and people don't have jobs. Not a great thing. So that was equilibrium in the aggregate supply aggregate demand model. In the next video, I'm going to teach you about the long run aggregate supply curve. Goodbye!